What if I told you the Bible wasn't the first place end times prophecy was written? What if someone before Moses, before Revelation, before the church even existed, already described the final generation with chilling accuracy? Because Enoch did. And what he saw doesn't sound like ancient history. It sounds like headlines. It sounds like now. Stay with me, because this may be one of the most suppressed prophetic warnings ever recorded. And by the end, you'll understand why so many people were never meant to read it. Enoch is one of the strangest figures in all of Scripture. Genesis gives us only a few lines, but those lines are haunting. Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him. Think about how abnormal that is. Everyone else has the same ending. They lived, they aged, and they died. But Enoch? No death, no grave, no funeral, just disappearance. And the Bible only speaks like that. When heaven interrupts earth, only two men in Scripture never tasted death, Enoch and Elijah, and both were taken for a reason, because they saw something, they carried something, they were pulled out of time as witnesses. Ancient writings say Enoch was shown the heavenly court, the place where judgment is decided. He saw angels, but not all of them were holy. He saw beings that rebelled. He saw the roots of corruption, and then he saw the future. Not the next year, not the next century, the final generation, the last age, the closing chapter of humanity. And that alone should make us ask, why would God show a man the end, unless the end was going to matter to us? Enoch describes a period unlike any other, a time when the world would look advanced, but spiritually rotten. And that distinction matters, because the final generation would not be primitive, it would not be ignorant, it would be modern, connected, educated, powerful. Yet completely blind. Enoch warns of a generation filled with knowledge, but empty of truth, information everywhere, wisdom nowhere, progress everywhere, holiness nowhere. And he says corruption would spread not only through governments, but through hearts. A spiritual infection, violence would return, not as isolated events, but as a culture. A world where cruelty becomes normal, where human life becomes cheap, where evil becomes entertainment. And then Enoch says something that should freeze you. He speaks of powers descending that were not human, forces behind the curtain, a supernatural rebellion repeating itself. He is describing a world reaching a breaking point, and the terrifying question is, are we watching that breaking point right now? Enoch's prophecy connects directly to the words of Jesus. Jesus said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be again." Most people think that just means people will be sinful. But Noah's days weren't just sinful, they were unnatural. Genesis hints at something darker, the Watchers, the fallen ones, beings who crossed boundaries. Enoch expands on this in terrifying detail. He describes Watchers descending, teaching forbidden knowledge, corrupting humanity, accelerating judgment. They taught things humanity was not ready for. They twisted creation. They spread rebellion, and the earth became defiled. So when Jesus says the days of Noah will return, he isn't just talking about moral decay, he's talking about a pattern, a cycle, a world approaching the same threshold again. That's why Enoch feels so modern, because the final generation looks normal on the surface, but underneath, The same darkness moves again. Enoch describes the last generation with chilling clarity. He says people will lose the ability to recognize evil. Darkness will be called light. Truth will be mocked. Righteousness will feel strange, and the faithful will feel like foreigners in their own world. Have you ever felt that? Like the world is drifting and no one notices? Enoch says arrogance will increase, leaders will exalt themselves, society will collapse morally while pretending to evolve. And the most disturbing part, people will celebrate what destroys them. Enoch's final generation is marked by deception, not just lies, but blindness, a world that thinks it is awake while being asleep. And prophecy was never given to entertain. Prophecy was given to warn. So why don't churches talk about this? Why is Enoch treated like forbidden fire? Because Enoch reveals too much. It explains the origin of spiritual corruption, the watchers, the war behind human history, and the timeline of judgment. Enoch doesn't just comfort, he exposes. And exposure is uncomfortable, because it forces humanity to admit history is not random. The world is not neutral. There is a battle happening, and most people are asleep inside it. Enoch pulls the veil back, and many would rather keep the veil closed. But ignoring prophecy doesn't stop prophecy. It only makes people unprepared. Enoch warns that the last generation will fall into one great deception. They will believe they have time. They will believe judgment is far away. They will believe God is silent. But silence is not absence. Silence is often the pause before intervention. Enoch says the earth will reach a point where heaven can no longer tolerate corruption, and when that moment arrives, everything changes quickly. The final generation isn't the end because God loses. It's the end because God finishes the story. The final generation is about separation, light from darkness, truth from deception, the righteous from the rebellious. Enoch's warning wasn't meant to create fear, it was meant to create awakening, because in every generation, God preserves a remnant. A people who still see clearly, a people who still walk with him. And if Enoch was describing our time, then the question becomes personal. Will you be asleep or awake? Because according to Enoch, the end is not random, it is appointed. And we are closer than anyone realizes. And in the next video, we're going to talk about what Enoch revealed about the Watchers, because what they are doing now may be the clearest sign of all. If this opened your eyes, comment one word: Enoch. And watch the next video, because what Enoch revealed about the Watchers is even more terrifying.